December 16, 1944. The frozen tree line of the Ardennes forest, Belgium. The wind howled through the skeletal branches like a warning no one heeded, carrying the sharp bite of impending snow. Sergeant Elias Kane crouched low in the foxhole, his breath fogging the air in ragged bursts. His gloved fingers gripped the cold steel of his M1 Garand, the rifle's weight a familiar anchor against the chill seeping into his bones. Around him, the 106th Infantry Division's men huddled in their positions along the thinly held line. Green troops, mostly, fresh from stateside training, their faces pale under helmets crusted with frost. The radio crackled faintly in the command dugout nearby, spitting out static-laced updates from higher up. "Hold the line! Reinforcements en route!" But Elias knew better. The quiet was deceptive, a predator's pause before the strike. Captain Harlan Reed, a wiry veteran from the 422nd Regiment with a scar snaking down his cheek from Anzio, peered through binoculars at the mist-shrouded valley below. His breath came steady, but his eyes betrayed the tension. Dark circles from sleepless nights, plotting defenses against whispers of a German build-up. "They're out there," he muttered to his radio man, Private Lenny Voss, who fiddled with the SCR 300 backpack set, its antenna swaying like a divining rod. Panzer Grenadiers, maybe even King Tigers if intel's right. Fog's hiding 'em, but I can feel the ground trembling already. Distant rumbles echoed, muffled by the dense pines. Could be artillery prep, or just the wind playing tricks. Elias shifted, his boots sinking into the muddied earth that refused to fully freeze. A slurry of leaves and thaw that sucked at every step. The division stretched thin across this sector, a bulge in the Allied line, where the front had gone quiet after Normandy's bloodbath. Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force had pulled veteran units east for the push into Germany, leaving the 106th, Elias's outfit, to guard this impenetrable forest. Impenetrable my ass, Elias thought, wiping sleet from his visor. He'd seen the maps, narrow roads twisting through ravines, ideal for an ambush but hell for a retreat. His squad, part of Company K, had dug in 2 days prior, stringing barbed wire and planting anti-tank mines along the likely avenues of approach. But supplies were low, ammo crates half empty, fuel for the jeeps rationed to drips, and the weather, a beast all its own, turning paths into quagmires that could bog down even a Sherman tank. A low growl pierced the fog then, growing into the unmistakable snarl of diesel engines. Elias's heart kicked up, pounding against his ribs. "Contact!" he whispered urgently to Corporal Mia Torres, the squad's sharpshooter, her dark eyes scanning the tree line through her scoped Springfield. She nodded, chambering around with a soft click that cut through the wind. Captain Reed barked orders into the field phone. "All units, eyes sharp. Report any movement." The radioman relayed it battalion-wide, the set hissing back acknowledgements from outposts a mile apart. In the distance, the first shadows materialized. German half-tracks, sent KFZ 251s, their tracks churning mud into fountains as they probed the edge of the woods. Infantry dismounted. Grey uniforms blending with the gloom, Mauser Kar-98Ks slung low. SS markings on their collars gleamed dully under the weak sun. The advance was deliberate, testing the line like fingers probing a wound. Elias sighted down his barrel, finger hovering on the trigger. A burst of MP-40 fire chattered from the German vanguard, stitching the underbrush harmlessly for now, suppressive fire to flush out defenders. Bullets whined overhead, splintering bark. "Hold fire!" Reed shouted, his voice steady but edged with steel. Elias's squad returned a disciplined volley, cracking shots that dropped 2 grenadiers in their tracks. One crumpled, clutching his throat, blood staining the snow red. The Germans faltered, seeking cover behind boulders and fallen logs. But more vehicles rumbled forward, Panzer IVs now, their 75mm cannons swiveling with ominous creaks. Panic flickered in the green recruit's eyes as the first shells screamed in. Explosions rocked the ridge, dirt and shrapnel erupting in geysers that showered the foxholes. Elias dove flat, tasting soil and pine sap, his ears ringing. A private nearby screamed, clutching a shredded arm. "Medic!" someone yelled, but the chaos swallowed it. Reed scrambled to the radio. "This is Baker 1-9er. Enemy armor breaking through Sector 3. Request immediate air support." Static answered. Then a voice from Division HQ. "Negative. Weather grounded the P-47s. Hold as best you can." Hold. The word tasted like bile. The Germans pressed, their infantry leaping forward in short rushes, bayonets fixed, shouting in guttural bursts. Elias fired again, his Garand bucking, nailing a Sturm Pioneer mid-stride, the engineers with flamethrowers, their packs hissing ominously. But the tide was turning. A Panzer's turret traversed, blasting a 50-cal nest to splinters. The line buckled, men falling back through the muck, slipping on roots slick with rain and blood. Reed grabbed Elias by the collar as he passed. "Sergeant, we can't let 'em flank us. That road down there, the main artery, if they take it, we're cut off." Elias nodded, mind racing. The mud. It was everywhere, a churning morass from the recent thaw, deeper than ankle-high in spots. Vehicles bogged already, half-tracks spinning futilely. An idea sparked, born of desperation. Stupid, maybe, but it might buy time. As the German column funneled toward the defile, engines roaring defiance against the terrain, Elias turned to his squad. "Torres, Voss, grab the demo charges. We're gonna make this mud their grave." The captain's eyes narrowed, but he gave the nod. The first panzers lurched closer, treads grinding earth to paste, oblivious to the trap forming in the shadows. If you want to hear how this desperate ploy unfolded, subscribe to the channel for more gripping tales from the front lines. The fog thickened as night fell, swallowing the battlefield in an inky shroud, but the distant clank of metal echoed on, relentless, drawing nearer with every labored turn of those iron beasts. The night pressed down like a lead blanket, the Ardennes chill, seeping through every layer of wool and leather, as Sergeant Elias Kane led his squad in a crouch along the shadowed ridge. The clatter of German tracks grew louder, a mechanical heartbeat pulsing through the fog, punctuated by the guttural shouts of Panzer Grenadiers coordinating their push. Elias's boots squelched in the muck with each step, the ground a treacherous soup of thawed soil and pine needles that clung like tar. He could smell the diesel fumes now, acrid and heavy, mingling with the metallic tang of cordite from earlier skirmishes. Private Lenny Voss huffed behind him, the SCR 300 radio slung over his shoulder like a burdensome pack mule, its dials glowing faintly green in the darkness. "Keep it low, Voss," Elias whispered, his voice barely cutting the wind's low moan. "One spark from that thing, and we're lit up like Christmas." Corporal Mia Torres flanked him, her Springfield rifle cradled close. The demo charges, a half-dozen satchel charges packed with Composition B, strapped to her web gear in burlap sacks that rattled softly. Captain Harlan Reed had peeled off with a fire team to cover their flank, his scarred face set in grim determination under the brim of his helmet. "Make it count, Kane," he'd said before vanishing into the tree line. "That defiles our choke point. Turn it into a quagmire they'll regret. You feel it, don't you? That knot in your gut as the shadows shift. The unseen enemy closing in like wolves scenting blood." Elias did, every nerve alight, his mind replaying the maps from the briefing tent. The narrow road snaking through the ravine, flanked by steep banks, softened by the freak November thaw. The Germans' 5th Panzer Army was betting on speed, Panzer V's and Stuggy 3 assault guns spearheading the 5th Panzer Army's thrust. Their 75mm KWK-40 guns itching for open ground, but this wasn't open, it was a natural trap if they could exploit it. The stupid trick. Blast the undercut banks and saturated earth along the approach, channeling rainwater and loose soil into a deliberate landslide of mud. Not enough to bury them outright, but to bog the heavies down, turn treads into anchors, and buy the 106th precious hours to regroup. They reached the edge of the defile, under a canopy of dripping branches. The road below, a ribbon of churned gravel, lit sporadically by the Germans' blackout-dimmed headlights. Half-tracks idled at the rear, their sent Kfz 251s disgorging more troops, Fallschirmjäger paratroopers this time, elite SS men with FG-42 rifles, their camouflaged smocks blending into the night. A lead Panzer IV growled forward, its Maybach engine straining against the incline, turret slewing left and right as the commander scanned for threats. Elias signaled Torres and Voss to fan out, crawling to pre-scouted positions, where the bank overhung the path like a rotten tooth, ready to fall. "Charge is here and here," Elias murmured, pointing to a cluster of exposed roots where the soil hung heavy and waterlogged. Torres nodded, her hands steady despite the cold, unwrapping the first satchel with practiced ease. She buried it shallow, wiring the detonators to a spool of primer cord that snaked back to their vantage. Voss laid the second, his fingers numb but fumbling the connections just right. The radio be damned. This was hands-on sabotage now. The air hummed with tension. A German patrol swept by 50 yards downslope, their boots crunching leaves, a Schmeisser submachine gun chattering idly in warning bursts. Elias held his breath, the world narrowing to the slow tick of his wristwatch and the distant rumble of more armor queuing up. From the radio's earpiece, clipped to Voss's collar, came Reed's voice, clipped and urgent. "Kane, they're committing. 2 Panzers in the lead infantry screens. You've got maybe 5 minutes before they hit your wire." Elias thumbed the mic. "Copycap, setting the hook." He glanced at Torres, her face streaked with mud, eyes fierce in the moonlight filtering through the clouds. "You ready for this, Corp? One wrong pull, and we're swimming in it too." She smirked, a flash of defiance. "Better than running, Sarge. Let's drown the bastards." The first Panzer crested the rise, its tracks pulverizing the roadbed into a spray of mud that arced like filthy rain. Behind it, a second followed, the assault gun's low-slung hull dipping into ruts already deepened by the thaw. Grenadiers fanned out, probing with flashlights that stabbed the dark like accusatory fingers. Elias waited, heart hammering, until the lead tank was squarely in the kill zone, treads midway across the softest stretch, engine bellowing in low gear. "Now," he hissed. Torres yanked the cord, the primer cord hissing like an angry snake. The explosions were muffled thunder, not the sharp cracks of open blasts, but deep, subterranean booms that shook the earth underfoot. Soil erupted in waves, tons of saturated dirt cascading from the banks in sluggish avalanches, mixed with icy runoff from the hills. The lead Panzer lurched, its front end plunging nose first into the sudden slurry, treads spinning futilely as mud climbed the glacis plate like a living thing. The commander inside barked orders, the turret whipping around wildly, but the 75mm barked too late, firing blindly into the fog, shells whistling harmlessly into the trees. Chaos bloomed. The second vehicle slewed to avoid it, only to founder itself, its lighter stewgy frame high-centering on a bulge of displaced earth. Infantry scattered, shouting in alarm, "Schlamm! Der Schlamm!" as the ground liquefied beneath them, sucking at boots and turning the road into a viscous sea. Half-tracks at the rear braked hard, but momentum betrayed them. One tilted sideways, its Hanomag engine whining in protest as it bellied out, troops leaping clear only to sink to their knees. Elias's squad opened up from cover, Garan's cracking in precise rhythm, M1 carbines adding their pop-pop to the fray. Torres picked off a grenadier fumbling with his radio, the FG-42 tumbling from his grasp as he toppled face-first into the mire. But the Germans weren't done. From the rear, a third Panzer pushed forward, its commander wiser now, angling off-road to bypass the mess. Mortar rounds began arcing in, Nebelwerfer rockets, their screaming banshee wail ending in fireballs that lit the night orange. One detonated 20 feet from Voss, hurling him backward in a shower of dirt. He scrambled up, coughing, the radio intact, but his face bloodied. "Sarge, they're flanking!" Elias fired on full auto, the Garand's en-bloc clip dumping lead into the shadows. Dropping an SS man who was rigging a tow cable to the bogged tank, Reed's voice crackled again. "Artillery's walking in. Fall back to phase line Bravo." The mud trick worked all right, too well in spots. The defile became a graveyard of stalled steel, panzers immobilized like beached whales, their crews bailing out under fire, scrambling for higher ground. But the cost mounted. A private from another squad caught a burst from an MP-40, crumpling silently as his buddies dragged him away. Elias covered their retreat, the squad slipping back through the underbrush, the suck of mud on their heels, a constant reminder of the fragile edge they'd just danced on. As they crested the ridge, the first Allied flares popped overhead, bathing the scene in stark white light, revealing the German column in disarray, engines stalling, men wading desperately. Yet in the distance, beyond the chaos, more shadows stirred. The 5th Panzer Army had reserves, and this was just the vanguard. Dawn was hours away, but the fight was far from over. The mud had bought time. But time for what? Elias wondered, reloading as the wind carried fresh cries from the valley below. Dawn crept over the Ardennes like a reluctant thief, painting the sky in bruised greys and golds that filtered through the canopy of frost-laced pines. Sergeant Elias Kane wiped the grime from his eyes. His squad hunkered down in a shallow draw behind the ridge, breaths coming in shallow huffs that misted the air. The mud from the defile still clung to their boots and fatigues, a cold, heavy paste that weighed down every movement. Below, the valley hummed with frustrated activity, German engineers shouting orders, their voices carrying on the wind like echoes from a nightmare. The stupid trick had worked better than Elias dared hope. The lead elements of the 5th Panzer Army's assault were mired, a graveyard of churning treads and stalled engines under the harsh light of Allied flares that had burned out hours ago. Captain Harlan Reed slid into the draw, his face smeared with camouflage paint and sweat, the scar on his cheek livid against pale skin. He clutched a captured MP-40, its stock chipped from rough handling. "Kane, you son of a bitch! That mudslide bought us the night, but they're digging out. Scouts report recovery teams with half-tracks towing the panzers. If we don't hit 'em now, they'll reform and punch through by noon." His eyes flicked to the radio on Private Lenny Voss's back. The set was dented from the mortar blast, but functional, its antenna bent like a question mark. Voss nodded grimly, a fresh bandage over his split lip, tasting blood with every word. "Division's finally stirring, Cap. Word from battalion, the 28th Infantry's shifting west to plug the gap. But we're on our own till then." Elias peered over the lip of the draw, the scent of wet earth and burning oil rising like a fog. Down in the defile, German Sturmpioneers, combat engineers from the 116th Panzer Division, swarmed the bogged vehicles, their entrenching tools flashing as they reinforced the banks to prevent further slides. A Stunk KFZ 251 half-track revved its Opel engine, chains rattling as it strained to pull a Panzer Beaver free. The tank's turret askew, its 75mm gun caked in sludge. Crewmen bailed out, cursing in guttural tones, their black panzer wraps muddied to a uniform brown. One officer, a Hauptsturmführer by his SS runes, barked at a radioman fiddling with a few G5 set, demanding breakthroughs from higher command, Piper's Kampfgruppe no doubt. The spearhead of this Ardennes gamble. You can almost hear it, can't you? The grind of metal on mud, the desperation in those voices as the mighty Wehrmacht machine sputters in the filth they never planned for. Elias felt it too, a surge of grim satisfaction mixed with the ever-present dread. His M1 Garand lay across his knees, the bolt slick with dew, 8 rounds in the clip waiting to speak. Corporal Mia Torres crouched beside him, cleaning her Springfield, with a rag torn from a dead grenadier's smock. "Sarge, that slide took out 3 heavies. But look, they're bridging the mess with fascines. Logs and debris. Won't be long before the next wave rolls." She pointed to a cluster of felled trees being dragged forward by lowboy tractors. The engineers improvising a corduroy road over the quagmire. Reed gathered the squad close, his voice a low rumble. "We hit the recovery op, bazookas on the half-tracks, grenades into the crews. Voss, call in what arty we can scrape. 106th batteries are low on shells, but every round counts." Elias nodded, mind flashing to the green recruits back at the main line. Their foxholes now reinforced with whatever logs and wire they could scrounge. The 422nd Regiment had held through the night, but casualties mounted, medics hauling stretchers through the muck, morphine syrettes glinting in the half-light. One private, a kid from Ohio named Harlan, no relation to the captain, had lost a leg to shrapnel. His cries still echoed in Elias's ears. They moved out in bounds, shadows among the trees, the forest floor a carpet of slick needles that muffled their steps. The wind picked up, carrying the chatter of typewriters from a distant German command post. Clerks tallying the foul-up, no doubt blaming the weather or the inferior Allied terrain. Elias's team crested a spur overlooking the defile, the air thick with the whine of winches and the pop of small arms as sentries cleared the underbrush. A bazooka team from another platoon, armed with the M1A1 launcher and its 2 36-inch rockets, was already in position, the loader feeding a round into the tube with a metallic snick. "Fire on my mark," Elias whispered, sighting a half-track that had just freed a Stuggy 3, the assault gun belching smoke as its engine coughed to life. The vehicle lurched forward, dragging chains that snapped taut, pulling another Panzer from the soup. Grenadiers formed a perimeter, their Kar 98Ks sweeping the ridges, but the fog clung low, buying seconds. Torres took a knee, her scope trained on the officer, directing the tow. "Got the head, man," she murmured. Elias raised a fist, then dropped it. The bazooka whooshed, the rocket streaking like a fiery arrow, slamming into the half-track side with a thunderous crack. Fuel tanks erupted in a fireball, orange flames licking the dawn sky, engulfing the tow crew in screams that cut short as ammo cooked off in secondary blasts. The freed Stug slewed wildly, its driver panicking, treads spinning back into the mud. German heads snapped up, machine guns traversing, MG-42s opening up in their signature sewing machine buzz, bullets chewing bark from nearby trunks. Return fire erupted from the American line. Garans barked in steady rhythm, carbines chattering from the flanks. Elias squeezed off shots, dropping a sapper mid-shovel. The man's entrenching tool clattering into the slurry. Voss relayed coordinates into the radio. "Fire mission. Grid Echo 5 Tango. Enemy recovery site. Over." Moments later, the earth trembled. 105mm howitzers from the 589th Field Artillery Battalion, their shells arcing in lazy parabolas before detonating in the defile. Dirt fountains erupted, one bracketing the bridging effort, scattering logs and men like toys. But the Germans adapted, ruthless as ever. A counter-battery salvo answered 105mm LEFH 18 guns from their divisional artillery pounding the ridge. Shells screamed in, one detonating close enough to hurl Voss flat, shrapnel whistling past Elias's helmet. Torres rolled, firing her Springfield, nailing a radio man whose few G-sets sparked and died. The officer, the Hauptsturmführer, rallied his men, waving a pistol, directing a squad of Panzer Grenadiers up the slope in a bayonet charge. "Für das Vaterland," he bellowed, his voice raw over the din. Elias's squad fell back by sections, laying down covering fire that felled half the assault wave. A grenade from Reed's team bounced into the mix, its pineapple fragmentation shredding the rest. The captain appeared through the smoke, dragging a wounded bazooka gunner. "They're breaking contact, pulling back to regroup." But intel says Piper's got Panthers inbound, real heavies with 75mm KWK-42s that laugh at mud. The defile smoked below, a twisted snarl of wreckage, but fresh engines growled from the east, reserves probing alternative paths through the woods. As the squad consolidated on higher ground, Elias caught his breath, the acrid bite of cordite filling his lungs. The mud had stalled them, turned advance into agony, but the 5th Panzer Army was a hydra. Cut one head, 2 more rose. Reinforcements trickled in from the 106th's battered remnants, jeeps splashing through ruts with ammo crates and hot chow that no one had stomach for. Yet the line held, fragile as frost on a window pane. In the distance, the rumble built again, deeper this time, promising a reckoning as the sun climbed higher, burning off the mist to reveal the full fury of the bulge. The sun hung low over the Ardennes, its weak rays slicing through the thinning mist, like searchlights probing for secrets, casting long shadows across the scarred valley. Sergeant Elias Kane pressed his back against a gnarled oak, the bark rough and damp against his field jacket, as the deeper rumble swelled into a symphony of destruction. His squad had dug in along a secondary ridge, shallow scrapes in the earth reinforced with pine boughs and whatever sandbags the quartermasters had scraped together from rear echelons. The air reeked of spent powder and diesel, a choking haze that stung the eyes and coated the tongue. Private Lenny Voss fiddled with his SCR-300, the radio's vacuum tubes humming faintly as he tuned into the fractured chatter from battalion. "All units, hold fast. 101st Airborne linking up south, ETA unknown." Captain Harlan Reed crouched nearby, his binoculars trained on the defile below, where the mudslide's aftermath festered like an open wound. The Germans had cleared a narrow path through the quagmire. Fascines of bundled branches and felled timber laid like hasty bridges over the worst of the slurry. But it was slow work. The 116th Panzer Division's engineers sweated under sporadic sniper fire, their entrenching tools biting into the soft banks, while Sturmpioneer teams rigged winches to haul the last bogged Stuggy 3 free. Elias could see the assault gun now, its low silhouette emerging from the muck, Maybach engine coughing black smoke as it pivoted, the 75mm Stuka 40 gun traversing with a hydraulic whine. Crewmen in mud-caked coveralls cheered hoarsely, but their triumph was short-lived. A crack from Corporal Mia Torres's Springfield dropped the gunner mid-celebration, his body slumping over the hatch. "They're pushing the flanks," Reed muttered, lowering the glasses. His voice carried the gravel of exhaustion, the scar on his cheek twitching as he clenched his jaw. Piper's Kampfgruppe is splitting, main force grinding through the center. But scouts report a battle group veering north, probing the firebreaks. If they link up, we're pinched. Elias nodded, his gloved hands reloading the M1 Garand with mechanical precision, the An-block clip snapping home with a satisfying click. The stupid mud trick had shattered their momentum, turning the 5th Panzer Army's blitz into a slog. But desperation bred ingenuity. German half-tracks, DKFZ 250s lighter than the 251s, were scouting alternate routes through the denser woods, their lighter tracks less prone to sinking, towing lighter Panzer IIIs with 50mm guns that could still punch through the 106th's thin armor, if any showed. You sense it building, that inexorable pressure, like the earth itself conspiring against the invaders, roots twisting underfoot, hidden streams swelling from the thaw. Elias felt it in his bones, the cold ache mirroring the dread coiling in his gut. Below, the recovered Panzer IV lurched forward, its treads churning fresh furrows, leading a column of infantry and Panzerfaust armed squads. They moved cautiously now, lessons learned from the night, spacing out to avoid enfilade fire. A Nebelwerfer battery unlimbered in the rear, the multi-barreled rocket launchers, moaning minis to the GIs, swiveling skyward, their crews loading the 150mm Nebel granite rockets with practiced haste. The first salvo whistled out, a banshee chorus ending in fiery plumes that bracketed the ridge, shrapnel pattering like hail on helmets and trees. Elias's squad returned fire, disciplined bursts from their positions. "Torres, take the spotter!" he barked, sighting a grenadier with binoculars perched on a log. His Garand bucked, the 30-06 round slamming home, the man toppling backward into the underbrush. Voss yelled into the radio handset, "This is King 2 actual. Adjust fire, overwatch on rockets, grid Foxtrot 9er. The 589th's 105 Mitmer howitzers responded after an agonizing delay, their counter-battery fire walking in with earth-shaking booms that silenced one Nebelwerfer, twisting its frame into scrap. But the damage was done. A shell fragment had winged a private in the next foxhole, his screams piercing the din as medics dashed forward with sulfur powder and bandages. Reed rallied them, his MP-40 chattering in short bursts to pin down an advancing fire team. "Kane, take your boys left. Cover that fire break. If those light panzers break through, they'll roll up our line like a rug." Elias led the way, crawling through brambles that tore at his sleeves, the squad bounding in pairs. Torres providing overwatch, her scope picking off stragglers, while Voss trailed with the radio, its weight slowing him to a hobble. The firebreak was a narrow scar in the forest, a logging path widened by recent thaws into a stream-fed gully, mud deeper here from unchecked runoff. Elias slid to the lip, peering down as the first German probe emerged, a pair of Sund KFZ 250 half-tracks, their 20mm Flak 38 autocannons mounted high, escorting two Panzer IIIs with long-barreled KWK 39 guns. The lead half-track hit the gully's edge and bogged instantly, its tracks spinning in a futile spray of filth, the 20mm swiveling wildly. Infantry dismounted, Waffen-SS men with STG-44 assault rifles, Sturmgewehrs, the new edge in close quarters, fanning out to secure the far bank. Elias grinned fiercely despite the fear gnawing at him. Same trick, different spot. Torres, demo on that bank, channeled the stream right into their laps. She moved like a shadow, planting the last of their satchel charges along the undercut slope, the primer cord trailing back to a concealed plunger. Voss relayed the setup. "Cap, we've got eyes on the bypass, setting another slide. Stand by for fireworks." The Germans pressed, oblivious at first. The Panzer III commanders urging their drivers forward with radioed commands from few G12 sets. One tank nosed into the gully, its hull dipping as the front sprockets sank, the 50mm gun elevating to sweep the tree line. Elias waited, finger on the plunger, until both vehicles were committed. Half-track mired, tank wallowing. "Light it up!" Torres plunged the detonator, the charges ripping with muffled roars. The bank gave way in a cascade of soil and water, the stream diverted in a sudden torrent that flooded the gully, turning it into a chocolate-brown river. The half-track flooded first, engines stalling with a gurgle, troops bailing out, only to be swept under or mired to their waists. The Panzer III thrashed, its lighter armor no match for the rising sludge, treads clawing air as the mud climbed to the turret ring. Panic rippled through the column. The STG-44s chattered uphill, bullets snapping branches and ricocheting off rocks, but the range was wrong. Too steep, too obscured. Elias's Garand spoke, dropping a Panzerfaust gunner mid-aim, the rocket launcher splashing harmlessly into the flow. Torres followed with precise shots, her Springfield's bolt cycling smoothly, felling two more as they tried to rig ropes for rescue. From the main defile, Reed's voice crackled over the radio. "Good hit, Kane. That's bought us another hour. Their heavies are rerouting south into the 424th sector." Cheers rose faintly from the line, but Elias knew it was hollow. The 106th was bleeding men and ammo, foxholes emptying as casualties mounted. A medic from Company I staggered past, carrying a limp form. Corporal Ruiz, gut shot by a sniper, his eyes glassy. The Germans fell back, engineers rushing to the gully with shovels and pumps, but the damage stuck. Piper's drive, the Ardennes offensive's dagger thrust, faltered here in the muck, the mud a lowly weapon that humbled steel behemoths. Yet as Elias reloaded, scanning the horizon, he spotted fresh dust clouds to the east, more reserves, perhaps the 2nd Panzer Division's Panthers, their sloped armor and 75mm KWK-42 high-velocity guns designed for breakthroughs. The sun beat down warmer now, drying the surface crust but not the depths, and the wind whispered of storms brewing. The line held, but for how long? The bulge was swelling, and this trick could only delay the inevitable storm. The afternoon sun clawed its way higher, turning the Ardennes mud from a clinging curse into a deceptive crust that cracked under the weight of every boot and tread. Sergeant Elias Kane scanned the eastern tree line from his entrenched position, the ridge now a ragged scar of upturned earth and splintered timber, where the 106th Infantry Division's remnants clung like burrs to a wool coat. His M1 Garand rested heavy across his lap, barrel fouled with residue from the morning's frenzy, the woodstock scarred from hasty reloads. The air hummed with the drone of distant aircraft, Allied thunderbolts finally breaking through the clouds. Their Pratt & Whitney engines a welcome growl against the fading echo of German engines sputtering in the defile below. Captain Harlan Reed slumped against a sandbag revetment, his captured MP-40 dangling from a sling, the magazine half spent. Blood crusted the cuff of his sleeve from a shallow graze he hadn't bothered bandaging, his eyes hollowed by the unrelenting vigil. "Kane, look at 'em down there. Piper's boys are unraveling," he said, voice rough as gravel, passing the binoculars. Elias took them, the cold metal biting into his palms. Through the lenses the valley sprawled in chaos. The original mudslide, a vast, stagnant lake of slurry, where Panzer Fus lay half-submerged, their 75mm QK-40 turrets tilted skyward like drowned sentinels. Recovery efforts had ground to a halt. Engineers from the 116th Panzer Division abandoned their winches, hauling wounded Sturmpioneer comrades back under covering fire from rear echelons. Half-tracks idled uselessly, their staid KFZ's 251 chassis too broad for the narrowed paths, while lighter sand KFZ's 250s ferried officers barking into Fuji 5 radios, demanding fuel and reinforcements that higher command, deep in the bulge's frozen heart, couldn't spare. Private Lenny Voss hunched over the SCR-300, its antenna quivering as he relayed fragmented updates. "Division reports the 26th Infantry's counter-attacking north. Bulge is pinching shut, but we're down to 20% ammo in Sector 4. His voice cracked, the bandage on his lip peeling in the warming air, revealing teeth gritted against the pain. Corporal Mia Torres leaned against a tree trunk, her Springfield propped nearby, methodically polishing the scope with an oil-soaked cloth. "That second slide in the gully did it, Sarge," she murmured, her dark hair matted under her helmet. "Heard a Panther crew cursing on the wind. Der Schlamm Teufel," they called it. Devil mud. Fitting. You can taste the shift, can't you? That fragile turning point where desperation flips to defiance, the forest itself rising against the invaders with roots and rain. Elias lowered the binoculars, a weary smile cracking his mud-streaked face. The stupid trick, those improvised blasts channeling the Thor's wrath, had multiplied its bite. Word spread through the line like wildfire. Other squads emulated it, rigging demo charges along every ravine and firebreak, turning the Ardennes' natural quagmires into deliberate traps. The 422nd Regiment's engineers, inspired by Elias's ploy, had even diverted a creek with felled logs, flooding a side trail where a Kampfgruppe probe from the 2nd SS Panzer Division bogged 3 Panthers solid, their sloped 75mm KWK-42 guns useless as the crews bailed into waist-deep filth, easy pickings for bar gunners. But victory came laced with the war's bitter dregs. Elias's gaze drifted to the aid station downslope, a canvas tent fluttering in the breeze, where medics from the 106th 77th Evacuation Hospital triaged the broken. Stretcher-bearers splashed through puddles carrying the latest. Private Harlan from Ohio, his amputation bandaged white against the red, murmuring for his ma between doses of morphine. Corporal Ruiz hadn't made it. Elias had seen the blanket over his face during the lull, a silent testament to the sniper's luck. The division had lost nearly 8,000 in the first days. Green troops shattered by the Blitz, but here in this muddy bulge, the tide stemmed. German casualties piled higher, frozen dead in grey uniforms sprawled where they'd fallen, their Mauser Kar 98Ks clutched like talismans, while SS Hauptsturmführers raged over captured field phones, blaming the unfair terrain on Führer directives that promised swift glory. Reed stood, stretching kinks from his back, and clapped Elias on the shoulder. "You pulled it off, Sergeant. That mud stopped 'em cold, bought Patton's boys time to swing north. Schaf's calling it a sector hold. The bulge won't burst here." His words hung heavy, laced with the unspoken. At what cost? Voss chimed in from the radio, a grin breaking through. Incoming resupply, jeeps with 105 shells and K rations. And get this, air supports overhead, P-47s vectoring on the defile. Sure enough, the sky split with the roar of 8 50-caliber machine guns, a flight of thunderbolts diving on the stalled column. Bombs tumbled free, 500-pounders from underwing racks blossoming into fireballs that engulfed a cluster of Nebelwerfers. The rocket launchers erupting in chain reactions of secondary blasts. German anti-aircraft fire, 80mm flak guns dragged forward in desperation, barked skyward, but the passes were too low, too fast. One half-track vaporized in a plume of black smoke, its crew vanishing in the inferno. Elias rose, signaling the squad to advance cautiously down the slope, Garand's at the ready. The ground sucked at their boots, a final reminder of the weapon that had saved them. But the fight ebbed now, German rearguards withdrawing in disorder, abandoning equipment to lighten their retreat. A captured Fallschirmjäger, hands raised, spilled details under Torres' watchful eye. Piper's Drive, the offensive's crown jewel, crippled by fuel shortages and this unforeseen morass. Units splintered and morale cracking under the endless slog. As the sun dipped toward evening, casting the valley in amber, Allied patrols pushed forward, securing the defile's heights. Jeeps from the 28th Infantry Division rumbled up, their 30-cal mounted guns sweeping the woods, linking the lines at last. In the quiet that followed, Elias paused amid the wreckage, a bogged Panzer III, its hatch ajar, the commander's Luger still holstered on his belt. He thought of home, the Iowa fields that turned to gumbo after spring rains, how something so simple could humble giants. The mud trick, born of a foxhole hunch, had rippled outward, delaying the 5th Panzer Army's thrust, giving Montgomery's forces breathing room to the north, dooming Hitler's last gamble in the west. But as flares popped overhead to mark the victory, illuminating faces etched with loss, Elias knew the war ground on. Berlin waited, with more blood and mud to claim. The Ardennes had held, but the shadows of what came next stretched long into the gathering dusk.